Welcome back to Become a Calm Mama. I'm your host. I'm Darlene Childress. I'm a life and parenting coach. And today on the podcast, I want to talk about allowance and financial literacy and how I teach the concept of allowance to my clients. And I brought this up today because the last few weeks in the Calm Mama Club, I have coached a few different moms about allowance and how they connect to chores and whether you should connect them to chores, whether you should pay kids for doing their chores and how it all works. So I wanted to break it all down on the podcast because I realized I had not done a podcast episode on allowance and chores. Today's podcast episode is not really going to be about chores because, as you'll see, the way that I teach allowance is really around the concept of financial literacy, and then I teach chores around being in a community. I will connect chores and allowance in this podcast, but not in the way that you typically think about them, because we're not going to pay kids to do chores, because as a part of your community, in your family, they should participate in that community because they live there, right? Because they participate in that community. So we want our kids to have chores so that they learn about being in a community and being responsible. And we want them to have money so they learn about being responsible with money. Okay, no joke. I just got interrupted while recording this podcast from my 18-year-old son, who's a freshman in college, asking me if I could send him his weekly allowance for college. Isn't that so funny? It's just made me chuckle. Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about financial literacy, not so much what it means, but just how important it is to give your kids the skills around managing their money. And I want to remind you that when you want to teach your kids how to read, you give them books. When you want to teach your kids about their feelings, you emotionally coach them about their feelings. When you want to teach them how to count or to do math, you give them things that they can count, little manipulatives, little math games. So if you want to teach your kids about money, you have to give them some. That's my frame of reference when it comes to allowance, is I want to give my kids some money so that they learn all sorts of things about money. So one thing I want them to learn when it comes to money is I want them to learn the feeling of having some money and then spending that money, making that decision to spend the money. I want them to have the feeling of spending it and being thrilled by the purchase and being really proud of themselves. And I also want them to have the feeling of spending money on something that's not quality or that breaks really fast or that they regret and have a little buyer's remorse. I want them to have a lot of different experiences with money, which means I need to give them some and then let them make a lot of decisions about it. I also want them to have the feeling of saving their money in order to get something. But I want them also to have the feeling of wanting something and not having enough because they didn't save. So in all these examples, I'm giving them experiences with being successful as well as failing. I want them to have money and to use it in ways that are great and not use it and use it in ways that aren't great. I want them to have money and save and feel that really great feeling of having a lot of money and then buying something if they want to buy something or whatever. And I want them to feel that sad feeling of, oh, I wish I would have saved my money so I could afford blankety blank. I also want them to experience the experience of paying for fines, for lack of a better term. Like sometimes in life, I might make a mistake. I might not pay my credit card bill on time, or I might accidentally leave my clothes in the washing machine and they get mildew or something like that. I might make a mistake in life, speeding ticket, or don't turn off the heater and I get a big gas bill, right? I sometimes do things in life that I make a mistake, then I have to pay money to fix it. It costs me money when I make mistakes. So I want my kids to have a little bit of money so that they can also pay actual money for the mistakes that they make. Now, primarily what I'm talking about here is chores. So I'm going to start there. with the way that I think about allowance with chores. Imagine you have a little, 7-year-old, and their job is to empty the dishwasher when they get home from school, or make their bed, or wipe down the sink, after brushing their teeth, or putting their socks and shoes away, some kind of task like that. And it's just a standard routine. I'll teach you in another podcast episode how to create chores, but like how to create the rhythm of chores in your family. But just thinking about the fact that you have expectations, your kids kind of know what they're supposed to do, right? They have jobs. And I love that. I want your kids to have lots of jobs. Now, what happens if they don't do their job? That's one of the biggest questions we get about, when you have a kid and they don't do their chores, what are you supposed to do about it? So here's how I do it is they have their chores, and if I have to do their chore for them, then they need to pay me for my time or my energy or the attention. They need to pay me back because I did their chore for them. So it needs to cost them something. Not doing their chore is a mistake. And when you make mistakes, you have to, quote unquote, pay for them, right? You have to make them right. You have to do restitution and fix things. And so that's how I handled chores for the most part throughout the kids' elementary school and even into high school. I would give them allowance, right? They would have some money that, they could also earn more money by doing extra chores that weren't their regular chores. So they'd have a little bit of spending money. And then if they didn't do something like bring the trash cans in, that was one of their big jobs, empty the dishwasher, obviously clean up after themselves. They didn't do one of their chores, and I had to do it because I went to bed and realized they went to bed and I realized they hadn't done it, or I go into the bathroom and I see the sink, something like that, and I wipe it down. I would make a little note and I'd say, this chore cost $1. And then I would either go the next day and say, hey, you owe me $1 because I did your chore. Or when it was time for allowance and I went to give them the $5, I would hold back some of the money and I'd say, this is to pay me for the chores that I did for you. You don't have as much because I'm docking your allowance to pay for the chores that you didn't do. So I love that concept. I'm not paying you for doing your chores. The allowance is set. But if I have to do your chores for you, then you're paying me. Isn't that great? So we want to give our kids an allowance, right? So that they can learn how to manage money, make mistakes, to use money to pay for mistakes that they've made, to spend money, to save money, to have all of those feelings. So one of the things that I've noticed has to come alongside when you start with allowance is that you start to eliminate or dramatically reduce the things that you buy for your kids. So let me break this down. Imagine that I'm going to like a carnival, like a state fair or like a local carnival, or your school might have kind of a festival or something like that. So as a parent, I decide what I'm willing to buy. And I decide that in advance. I'm not impulsively getting there and just being like, oh my God, my kids keep asking me for money and I'm so overwhelmed and you don't want to say no. I want you to think about how much you want to spend, what you're willing to pay for. So I'm like, I'm going to give you each, $20 wristband or $20 in coins or whatever the little thing is. And I'm willing to buy one sweet treat, right? Then anything extra that you want, you can pay for it. So that kind of idea is so that your kids have to have some money if they want to pay for something extra. So imagine you go to Target or you go to, a drugstore or something like that. And they're like, Mom, I want to buy this, little army men or this little doll or these, these stickers or these, stick-on tattoos or something like that. One of those impulse buys, and then they say, Mom, can you buy this for me? And you can say, oh, no, I'm not spending my money. Did you bring your money? And they'll probably say, no, I don't have any money with me. I have money. My money is at the house. Can I pay you back? And then you can decide whether you want to lend money that day or not. So you can say, no, the bank's closed. I'm not open for lending money. Or if it's something that you don't mind them having, you can say, sure, go ahead. I'll happy to lend you money. And then when they get home, they hand you the money back. Now, what form is this money in? It's really important for kids under 12, even a little bit older, but for sure under 12, to have some sort of piggy bank or a place to hold their money so that they can see it and touch it and notice if it's growing, if it's a little bit of a lot. We want to make it concrete. So having a bank account and having a money in the bank is a little bit vague for them. It's hard for them to understand how much it is, how much is available, those kinds of things. So we want our kids to have a piggy bank of some kind. And it doesn't have to be like an actual piggy bank. We just want them to have something that they can put their money in. I think my kids had some of them, they sometimes had wallets, which was fun, but they'd always lose them. But they'd have a little basket in their room and they'd have money in these little baskets. So when you think about having your kids, when you are out and about, start to buy them less stuff, or when you're going to buy them something, tell them in advance. And then let them decide if they want to buy something extra, that it would be their money. Now, what people often ask me is, should they be able to buy whatever they want? What if it's a piece of junk? What if it's candy, right? What if it's, something they want to buy for their friend, or they want to spend too much money on something? Then this is where we want to begin to separate ourselves a little bit and let them have that experience. Let them figure out for themselves what they want to spend money on. Let them buy something and regret it. Let them buy something and be happy about it. Let them find the feeling of giving a gift to a friend and spending a lot of money. But then the next time when you go to the carnival or you go to the drugstore or wherever, and they realize, oh, I spent all my money on that one thing. Say, yeah, that's tough. It's going to take you a while. How many weeks did it take you to get that much money? Do you know? And you start doing the budgeting. You start doing the math. You start having conversations with them. If you give them $5 a week and they want to buy something that costs $60, that's 3 months of savings. That's a lot of savings. That's a lot of time to not buy something that they would want, something smaller, something less expensive. So we want to stop buying toys on demand, snacks on demand, extras on demand. We want to help our kids look forward to birthdays and holidays for the special items, but also having that desire of saving your money to get something. Now, obviously with someone with ADHD, or most kids in general, they're going to have a lot of regret. They're going to buy things that are dumb. I would rather your kids buy stupid stuff at age 7 than to waste tons of money when they're in college. I want them to learn the feeling of not having enough money to get something or to have something that they want. I want them to have that experience. So we have to give them these small examples and moments where they get to practice spending money and things like that. So you have to start buying less. Now, if your kid was trying to save something, save $60 and they only have, $20, you are welcome to create chores or extra jobs that you can pay them for. And you can be really generous. You can be stingy. Doesn't matter. You can say, okay, if you want to do my chores for me, these are things that I am responsible for. You're welcome to do those. And here's the going rate. So you could just make it up if you want them to, do the laundry or mop the floors or, small chores that you do in the house that you think that they're capable of doing properly. You go ahead and give them that responsibility. And then you can quality control it and just say, nope, you do not do a $5 job. This is only a $4 job. If you want the full $5, you're going to need to do this and that, right? Go back and have them do that. That is really that feeling of working hard to earn something and to keep at it and to, do it properly and to get paid appropriately. That's a good feeling. So you can teach your kids the value of working to get money, working to earn, and then also how important it is to do good work in order to get your full pay. So you can teach a little bit of work ethic and work habits in there when it comes to earning money. So we have like a baseline for allowance, and then we have a extra opportunities if you want to. You don't have to. You actually don't have to do any of this at all. You don't have to give your kids money if you don't want to. You don't have to buy them extra stuff ever. There's no requirement that you add anything to your life whatsoever. I just know that some people are interested in teaching their kids about money, and this is a good strategy to do it. Now, how much money is one of the questions I get. And obviously that's very personal depending on your financial situation, where you live, what your kids have access to. If you had 4 kids and you give each one $5 a week, then that's $20, that's $80 a month. Like, it can add up quite a bit. The cool thing though is when you start giving your kids allowance and you stop buying extra stuff, you'll actually have a better handle on your own income, your own money, because you won't be just kind of throwing money over here and there and buying everybody a Starbucks or everybody an ice cream when you weren't planning on it. Because those are the kinds of things that we're going to pull back. We're going to say, no, I'm not going to buy those today. I'm not willing to spend my money. You can spend yours. So you'll probably actually spend less on your kids if you give them a decent size allowance. What's a decent size allowance? You can start this around 3, and I feel like $1 a week is great. Up until they're like 5 or 6, something like that, 7, you can keep it to $1, and then you want to kind of go up to a little bit more, $2, $3, $5. Our thing was $1 until you were 6, but I always did the boys at the same, so like Sora was 4, he got a little bit extra. And then we did $5 for a really long time. It was $20 a month. That seemed to be about right for them in terms of stuff that they would probably want to get. And then when they were in high school, I started to change. I gave them much more, but they had to buy their food when they were out with their friends. They had to pay for their movies. They had to pay for their bowling nights and whatever that kind of thing was. They'd have to pay for those things. So it was more like $20 a week. But if they saved it, they could have $80 in a month, and they would be able to do something really fun, like go to a concert. That's the same concept I have now with how much money I give to my kids in college. Is I give them slightly more than is necessary for the week or for the month. One kid wants it weekly, one kid wants it monthly, because they're trying to figure out how to budget. And I give them a little bit extra because I've told them many times I'm not willing to pay for spring break trips. I'm not willing to pay for concerts. I'm not willing to pay for extra stuff that comes up. You have to save your money for those things. And they consistently don't have any money. They blow it. So they're learning. They're figuring it out. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about was sweets and candy, because I've given that as an example. So it's like, I'm willing to buy 1 sweet treat at the school carnival. And that's only if you wanted to. You could also say 0. Now, what if your kid's like, I want to spend $20. I brought all my money and I want to buy all of the sweets, right? Some of kids are going to want that. You are, as a parent, I've talked about this on the podcast, you are responsible for what your kids eat, when they eat, and where they eat. Now, even if it's their money, you always have that right of refusal. So you can say, no, I'm not having you buy extra sweets today. You can spend your money on other things. You're welcome to spend your money as long as you don't spend it on sweets. That's like, when my kids were in elementary school, we would go to this park every Wednesday after school, and there would be a ice cream truck. And that ice cream truck would come, and the boys knew, and they would bring their dollar, and they would bring their, very excited about it. And they would buy like SpongeBob SquarePants ice cream. It was like just such junk and then finally I said to them, you are welcome to spend your money on non-sweet things. during the school week. So I just kind of made this new rule where it's like, you can maybe buy things on the weekends for sweets, but not during Monday through Friday. I just made it up. And then they were like, oh, okay, that's the rule. I can't buy anything. They're sad. And that's fine. It's okay. So you get to say no, you have the veto. I would caution you, like the first few times the boys bought ice cream on the ice cream truck, I was like, fine, whatever. But then I didn't like make it a thing, but then it became kind of a habit. And I was like essentially giving them money every week so they could buy stuff from the ice cream truck that I didn't really want them to do. I realized that didn't feel aligned. Then I pulled back, made a new rule. So sometimes you kind of need to let the failure happen or find out what you're truly uncomfortable with. Maybe it's a one-off. I actually want them to buy some ice cream and then go, well, that was stupid. I'm done with it and I wasted my money. Like I wanted them to have that regret. But in this case, it wasn't happening. They were like excited every Wednesday. And I was like, okay, no, I'm going to fix this. So I want to caution you to not say no right away, but let the situation play out a little bit. See if they're going to come to their own conclusion. Let them do their own thinking. You can talk about it. You can say, oh, remember, okay, you have $5. If you buy this thing for $2.50, you're going to have $2.50. But remember, this weekend, we're going to whatever you're going to. Do you want to only have $2 or do you want to have $5? So you can start talking about how do you want to spend your money, thinking about the future, giving them perspective. But if they don't have any money, they're just asking you for money, then that's a very different conversation. You're not asking them to think about their money. You're just telling them no, and they don't understand why you're saying no. You probably don't even really understand why you're saying no half the time, right? So to recap, we want to give our kids some money. We want to give them some allowance, and that just gives them the ability to have some money in their pocket that you can teach them how to spend, how to save, how to have regret, how to feel proud. And also they have some money to pay you back for when you do things for them, like their chores. And that way you have a little bit of another way to have them make repair back to you using money. You don't have to. You can also just use time. Hey, you didn't do your chores. I did your chores today, so you can do mine. I'm happy to take you to soccer once you have done these 3 things, like vacuumed the floor, tidied up the pillows, wipe down the doorknobs, small little things like that. You can just have them repair back to you in time. But also if they have some money, you can have them repair back to you in money, which is pretty cool. All right. I think that is all I had to say about it. I guess I was going to say when to open a bank account. I would recommend a little bit older, to be honest, like when they're 12 or 13. And the green light cards are really helpful because they can see that they have, they can see you give them a certain amount of money and then they can like practice with the debit card thing. But it's very interesting how like my kids have a credit card and they have a debit card, and they really like using their debit card more than credit because they can see the money going down. With the credit card, they don't see it. They just they're like waiting to get to their max or something. It's not real as much as like, oh, I only have, $22 left in the bank. So they're constantly checking their debit accounts. Now they're older. So how did they learn how to do that? Is through having allowance and then eventually having jobs, like actual jobs where they, made money, and then learning how to manage that money completely. Paying for gas and, buying their own clothing and paying for their food out and their drinks out, like their Starbucks and their Red Bulls and whatever. That's later. So when they're in middle school, you kind of want to establish like, okay, we're going to have a bank account. Now, if your kid has a ton of money from grandparents and you have to make a bank account, like, of course, but realize that they don't know anything about it. They're not connected to the bank account. You're the one who's managing that. The only money that they really manage is the stuff that's in their hands until around 12. Now, when you open up a bank account for them, whatever age, I suggest you opt for monthly statements, paper statements. And hopefully banks still offer that where you can get something in the mail because then it's addressed to them. They open it, they start to review it. You can review it with them and you get into the habit of looking at how much you have and how much you spent and like, are you happy about the things you bought? What are your goals? What do you want to save money for? Are there anything extras? Do you want to spend money on paying me for your chores? Do you want to keep doing that? Or would you rather just do them? So you're having a conversation with that monthly statement, which is really cool. Okay. I think that is it. If you have any questions, of course, you are always welcome to join the Calm Mama Club. We talk about this kind of stuff in our weekly group sessions. That is on Tuesdays at 9:30 Pacific. We meet every Tuesday for about an hour. Lots of, the people come, the moms come, they ask questions, and the moms ask me questions and I coach them. And then there's some chat happening with, like, in the chat. There's lots of really good ideas going on in there all the time, which I love. So the Calm Mama Club is always available to you to join. It's $30 a month. You get the online course, the Calm Mama handbook, weekly group coaching, as well as a bunch of other online resources. So that's pretty cool. Or you can reach out to me and DM me on Instagram at Darlene Childress, or reply to an email if you're on my email list and just let me know, like, oh, hey, I have a question about this. And I'm happy to answer. All right, mamas, I hope you are having a great week and that you've learned something today about money. And I will talk to you next time. Hey, mama, if you enjoyed this podcast episode, I want to encourage you to do two things. The first is go to my website, calmmamacoaching.com, and get a copy of the Stop Yelling cheat sheet. You'll get a step-by-step breakdown of the most important tool I teach, which is the pause break. And you'll also get 40 ideas to reset your body and balance your nervous system so you don't have to yell at your kids. You can get a copy of that, again, at my website, calmmamacoaching.com/stop yelling. The other thing I'd love for you to do is go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review this podcast so that other moms can discover empowering and helpful, practical parenting strategies just like you did today. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. It means a lot to be in your ear every week and to support you on your parenting journey.